There we go. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome. We have Tina here with us. She is out of Sarasota, Florida. She's going to be sharing her experience, strength, and hope. We have the wonderful Mr. Dominic here hanging out with us tonight. So we're really, really excited to be able to share with you and conversate with you guys. If you are in recovery, make sure you drop where you are watching from. If you're not in recovery, if you are in recovery, drop how long you've been in recovery, and so we can celebrate that with you for sure. And so we're just gonna kind of get right into it. Tina, thank you so much for coming on and having the courage to share your experience. And I feel like you're a professional now since this is the second time in a week that you've
I don't
done
know
it.
about
So,
professional, but I just feel that I'm coming up on a year clean, so I feel like it's time. It's time for me to start
absolutely.
sharing my story.
Yes, yes, definitely. So you experienced homelessness and addiction, correct?
I did, yes.
Do you want to give us a little bit of like backstory of how you kind of came into using?
Sure. Let's see. I am Korean, German, and Irish. I am an army brat, and I moved around a lot. I grew up in a abusive household. My stepfather was an alcoholic and very abusive, and I ended up in foster care. And then I moved to New York to live with my mother because she was not really around too much. She lived in a different state, but we moved to live with her, and I ended up back in foster care. So I was in foster care and group homes until I was 17. But during that time, I suffered from PTSD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, depression, that kind of thing. And I was in and out of psych hospitals and on different kinds of meds. And it's just like I was in so much emotional pain, I guess, that I turned, and then I was homeless in New York. So I turned to drugs then, and to not feel, to fit in, to feel something. Because for a long time, I didn't really know who I was, because I felt like my family hated me. They wanted nothing to do with me. And then, funny story, my judge was Judge Judy, the TV
No
judge.
way.
She used to be a family court judge in New York City, and she was my judge. She was my judge, and I hated her because my mom asked her, "Well, what do I do with her?" And she said, "Leave her where she is, and because otherwise she'll never learn." And I learned how to fight, and I got beat up all the time, and I ran away all the time. I was constantly running from the police. And then I was homeless in Port Authority for a long time. And then I got emancipated when I was 17. And I became a stripper to support my habit. And then got pregnant. I managed to stay clean my entire pregnancy. But then when I had my son, I had a mental breakdown. And I didn't really have too much family support. And I ended up in the hospital. And what ultimately happened, I ended up relapsing, and I ended up giving my son up for adoption when he was 2. And I haven't really spoken to him since he was about, I don't know, maybe. I spoke to him briefly on Facebook when he was 20, I guess, and he doesn't want anything to do with me. He says, "Find solace in the fact that you gave me up, but I have found a good life, and I'm happy, and there is no room for you in it." Um, my only child. Sorry. I ended up in Florida because I ran from New York because I was detoxing off of heroin at the time, and I ran from New York to go do that, and then I just ended up kind of bouncing around and homeless here and there, and I ended up finding my drug of choice, which was meth, and was on that for a long period of time, and that really affected my mental health because I even now still have like little quirks or whatever that the doctor says that they may or may not go away. Like I'm constantly fidgety, like I move a lot. And, but yeah, and then I was homeless. I had been homeless for 2 years in Sarasota, 1 year the first time, and then I left and ended up coming back and then homeless for another year.
Hmm. That was a lot.
So,
That was a lot. Wow. I'm like just trying to process like so much. Do you have any questions for her through that? So okay. Family moved around a lot.
yes.
So I would imagine, if you're anything like the rest of us, being a person, with the you know, DNA genetic predisposition to addiction, it's already hard enough to feel like we can be comfortable in our own skin.
Yeah.
So moving around so much and having to try to make friends or trust people or make any kind of connections must have been really difficult for you.
Oh yeah, especially in school because I was an all A student, but they had moved me around so much that they kept losing my transcripts, and I ended up having to get a GED ultimately. And I could have really went far in school, and I could have gotten into a really good college if I had applied myself and not moved around so much, and just kept falling in the traps of addiction and being homeless and using. It just was it was just a vicious cycle, you know.
Hmm. And so at what age did you become pregnant, you said?
Oh, I was 21. I was 20 when I got pregnant, 21 when I gave birth.
So were you in like a long-term relationship, or was this just like someone you were dating or just hooked up with?
Is somebody that I dated briefly that was going to like night school, same night school as I was. And then ironically though, when I found out that I was pregnant, he was not happy about it. Like he fought with me about getting an abortion, and then he disappeared and I had the baby.
Mm,
I'm glad I
and
did because I haven't been able to have any more kids since then. So I'm really glad that I did, even though I didn't get to raise them.
and did you have any kind of support when you were pregnant?
Not really. I mean, I had my sister and I had my mom, but they were not very happy with my choices in life. And I just for especially for my mom being Korean, she was very, very critical of everything that I did. And if I didn't live by, if I didn't live up to my sister was always a golden child. She felt like her kids just, you know, were no good, and that we were always bringing her down, and I could never. I just felt like I could never do well in her eyes. I mean, she tried to help me as moms do, but our relationship was just not good.
So she was like if you made her look bad, then you were just like not she just kind of
Yeah.
shoved you over. Yeah.
Well, yeah. She had
Um
an issue with my weight. She had a huge issue with my weight. She used to tell me all the time, "You'd be so beautiful. You look like Sophie Loren if you just lost some weight," and or my hair color, or people that I hung out with. Even when I was in recovery the first time, because I was in recovery for 5 years when I was 25, she didn't like the people I hung out with in the rooms in the program. She was just very critical of everything, which made things even harder for me.
mhm. So, what when you had your mental breakdown, did you have any support then, or did you go into like a facility?
I went into a psych hospital and I became catatonic for 2 days. Like you could talk to me, but I literally just mentally wasn't there. And they kept changing my medication and things like that, but I didn't really have much family support at all. I went through all that stuff on my own. My mom just felt like, it was all in my head, and that I was acting, and that I wasn't really mentally ill, or had, because that being mentally ill would have been a reflection on her. Like, okay, if my daughter's mentally ill, that means that that people are going to think that I have problems too, and that's how she looked at it. So very, very little support even then.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you want to add on that? Um, so being a young person, with mental illness, it's like it's hard to diagnose, especially when you have like issues with drugs, right? Because it's like almost like they want to diagnose you with all these things, but it's hard to differentiate whether it's like mental health or the addiction part of it.
Well,
Um,
my doctors have always said that my mental health came first because I was diagnosed first time when I was really, really, really young. And my doctor at that time felt that it didn't, my family trauma, of course, you know, being abused as a child or whatever, and then not having any connection with my family contributed big time. Um, but that the big thing for me was having mental illness came first before my addiction, before I used. It just made it easier to fall into that trap of using.
so kind of like a self-medicating.
Yes,
Hmm. And now, putting your son up for adoption um is like pretty traumatizing.
it is.
Yeah. They don't, I feel like they don't address this enough, like the trauma of not only, like putting children up for adoption or losing custody. Like those kind of things are very traumatic.
I think one of the most traumatic days of my life is having to sit in a courtroom and sign over the rights of my son. I was pretty much saying goodbye to him because he lived in a crisis nursery right before that. I put him in a crisis nursery, and they keep them babies in New York up to 3 days until you figure out what you're going to do. And within that 3 days, I had gone down to DCF and was like, look, I can't take care of my kid. And this woman came in to see him in this crisis nursery, and I met her, and she ended up fostering him. And then shortly after that, I technically asked her to adopt him because I knew that even if I was able to get the addiction part under control, my mental health was not good at all. And they both kind of like contributed to each other. So it was just like back and forth, back and forth. If I got one under control, I was still messed up in another, so I was going to make me messed up in the other way. Anyway, you know. So
Do
I mean,
you
in my heart of hearts, sorry.
I was just gonna ask, like, do you think that after that you did it cause you to spiral?
Yes, it most certainly did. I mean, I just started getting into more and more drugs, and I my lifestyle, like I haven't really had a home, I guess, and I can't really ever say that I've had a place that I could really call home. I mean, right now I live in a halfway house, and it's the closest thing to a home that I've had in a really long time. Even trying to live with my mother was never really a home, but just my life was, I was hopeless, helpless, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I was suicidal. I've had tried to commit suicide several times. Um, Once I ended up in a coma for 3 days because they found me half dead on the side of the road from um, taking an entire bottle of Xanax. Um, it's just that deep, dark hole that I was in. I did not see any way of getting out. And even my first time of being in recovery, it was, like I said, I was in recovery for 5 years. It was a brief glimpse at what my life could be if I were to get clean, if I were to stay clean. But then I ended up marrying an addict. And then marrying an addict had me spiraling right back down again. And then I'm being around my mother, I was always spiraling right back down again. And then when my mother died, I feel like my entire world just crumbled around me.
So, okay. So you were in recovery for 5 years. What was your pathway?
Pathway into recovery.
Yeah, did you go to treatment or meetings
Well,
or?
I ended up seriously like sick. The doctor said that I had like infections on top of infections. I had sinus infection on top of strep throat, on top of uh, pneumonia. I had some stomach thing going on, just like all the way up and down. The doctor said it was going to take months for me to even start to feel half human. But I spent that time, at least a month of that time in the hospital. And then from the hospital, I went to a psych hospital where I was there for 3 months. And then from the psych hospital in New York, I went to rehab, which I was there for 30 days. And then I tried going to a halfway house where I actually met Heidi Hurt, William Hurt's wife, the actor William Hurt.
Okay, uh-huh.
You know who he is?
I've heard of him before.
Danger Will Robinson. He
Oh
was in that
yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah,
I know his ex-wife Heidi. She was in the program as well, and she was upset with me when I left. But that I was able to stay, I guess, dry for 5 years. But marrying an addict and the relationship with my mom, it wasn't going to last. And I was surprised it lasted as long as it did.
So was he an active user?
Yes. However, he lied to me in the beginning, and I didn't think that he was using, but he was disappearing on the weekends and going to New York and hanging out with his buddies. And then finally he just came and brought stuff back with him. And I don't know. I was just at my wit's end and just couldn't say no.
Hmm. So was this before or after you got introduced to meth?
Before.
Before. Okay. So what was
This
your
is when I
drug of
got
choice
introduced to
then?
heroin. Heroin.
Okay. Gotcha. And so he was using this behind your back. What was your living situation with him?
Well, we were living with my mom, and before we got married, he had asked my mom if he could marry me. My mom was in love with this man because she could not believe this handsome man would want to be with her fat daughter. Because those are her exact words. And my wedding was like one of the worst days of my life because she had gambled away all the money that was supposed to go into my wedding. My wedding dress, she made me return because she said that it cost too much money and I had to get some cheap dress from some cheap store. The wedding day was it was one of the worst days of my life. And I don't know, our relationship I always felt like he was with me to please my mother, I think, because he was good friends with my mother. So I felt like he was with me to please my mom. And my mom gave him a job and a car and gave us a place. And I think he reaped the benefits of being in a relationship with me. But then he was into cocaine, I was into heroin. So when I went off the deep end and my mother died, that was his excuse to leave, to get out. And I just kept spiraling down further and further.
That's so weird that he would be trying to like please your mom like that, you know?
Yeah.
That's very strange. It almost sounds like suspicious. Like what did they have? What was their deal, you know?
I've always thought about that. Like they would always disappear off together, and they would go shopping at Home Depot together. They're doing these house fixing projects, and every time I turn around, oh, I'm just with your mom. I'm with your mom. I've had my suspicions over the years, but I could never make anything concrete. So I just kind of let it go.
Yeah. So okay, so let's get into the meth. Now, at this point, did you have any kind of like spirituality?
Yes, I did. Ever since I got saved for the first time when I was 13 years old. So God has always been a part of my life. I've always kind of like pushed him to the back burner and, said that I didn't deserve him because I didn't want to live. I've always turned my back on him. I've always known he was there and I've always known he existed. And I've always seen the miracles and the things that he's done in my life. And more so now that I'm in recovery again. But yeah, God has always been there.
Hmm. So, when how did you get introduced to meth?
Whew. I moved to Florida and was bouncing around in Florida, and I was homeless, and I was staying with a friend of a friend who was selling meth, and I had never tried it before in my life. And he actually showed me how to shoot meth, and which was really scary at first, but I fell in love with it, and it became my like ultimate drug of choice. Like over heroin was like my ultimate drug of choice, and I
So
was off and running.
sorry, is that how you did it the first time?
Yeah.
Ooh, that is quite a way to jump in.
Yeah.
Um, so okay. So this guy, so he's like, is he like, he's like your boyfriend or whatever?
At the time.
Okay. And how old are you here?
Oh my goodness. 35, maybe 30, somewhere between 32 and 35. It was meth was came later in life, but it definitely ended up being my first love.
So did you notice anything like spiritual about meth?
Spiritual about meth, except the
Yeah.
fact that I was seeing people that weren't there and hearing things that weren't there. That kind
Right.
of,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I was constantly talking to myself and people. Well, can't you see the person I'm sitting next to? I'm talking to. There's nobody there, or shadow people as they call it, or just I don't know. I look back on it now and I talk to people who knew me then, and they're like, "Dina, you were out of your mind." I mean, I was completely out of my mind. Like I said, I still have little effects from using meth. Like, I can't keep still. Um, my mouth moves really fast sometimes. And I've asked the doctor about it, and I've had students in my school where I work ask me, "Are you okay? Because your mouth won't stop moving." And it's not. I'm not on anything. Or I hum constantly, and these are
Mm-hmm.
after effects of doing meth.
Mm-hmm.
And doctors say
How
it may or
long
may not go away.
how long were you on it for?
10 years.
10 years on
Yeah.
IV.
Yep.
Wow. Wow.
It did a lot of damage.
So what was your like divine intervention?
At this last time, this time here, I
Mm-hmm.
would say that like I said, I ended up homeless in Sarasota. I was in a relationship at the time, and my divine intervention was he ended up getting arrested. Now he was like my knight in shining armor while I was on the street. He took care of me, kept me safe. You know, he was more of a he didn't use, but he drank. So he was my protector. Like felt like I could use in safety because he was there. And then he had gotten like ripped out of my world, and I went on another downward spiral and ended up in a hotel room with these strange people and spent my entire check, all my money, and then but that wasn't like the total end because I tried to go into a halfway house after that and I wasn't ready. I was like still really upset about him getting arrested and ended up going out one more time. And I was living in a waterlogged tent, and I it was just I was just in a really horrible, bad place. And I tried to get myself Baker acted and sent into the hospital. Well, first I tried to get myself Marchman acted, and at the time they didn't have any beds, so they ended up putting me back out on the street again. And then the second time I said, no, I can't do this anymore. Like I was physically ill. Like I was living outside. So I Baker acted myself and ended up in a psych hospital. And I told them in the psych hospital, I will kill myself if you don't get me into detox and into rehab. And then I ended up going into detox. And then from there, the Salvation Army. And the Salvation Army saved my life. The what I learned in the Salvation Army in the 3.5 months that I was there, and the people that came into the Salvation Army and brought meetings, like Sonia brought meetings into the Salvation Army, and the women who brought meetings in there, it was just like, I said, I'm doing my life all wrong. I'm living my life because I feel like, I felt like I was destroying my life because of how I grew up and how my family destroyed my life. So if they didn't care, then why should I, kind of thing. That I was going to I was going to continue to destroy my life until I died. Well, I had a wake up call in Salvation Army that told me, you know, that was pretty much stop living your life for other people and start living your life for yourself. Start putting yourself first because you're worth it. You're worth more than these drugs. You're worth more than these streets. You're worth more than these bad relationships and these trauma bonds, and it's when I made the decision to give myself a chance that I can have all the things that will make me happy, like you know, when I went into the halfway house, I left, I went into the halfway house. I hit the ground running. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this 100%. He gets out of jail, but my one non-negotiable was if he left the program or if he used, then we were done. And that's exactly what happened. He left the program and we were done. And he went back to live with his mom, which is good riddance for him. But I kept going. I got a job at a school doing something I never thought that I'd be able to do, but it's my dream job. It's something I've loved all my life is working with children. And the fact that I get to go to school today and sub for all these different teachers, and they actually request me to sub their class. You know, that would have been unheard of to me 10 years ago. You know, I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. I go to meetings. I have a sponsor. I do step work. I'm involved. I get involved in like the AA or NA committees. I did like the NA party for the AA New Year's Eve party. I was part of the committee for that. I just stay involved, and whatever I can do, I do it, you know, and sharing my story and getting the word out that if it can work for me, this low bottom addict who, you know, that should have died a million times, it can work for anybody.
So, what about like moving forward as far as like relationships and stuff go? Like what is your what have you learned in that?
I've learned to put myself on a 5-year man ban. No relationships for at least 5 years. I feel that I'm learning to love myself for the first time ever, and I feel like I need at least 5 years to get healthy, to grow in this program, to do the things that I love and the things that I want to be, and just for me, you know, because I deserve that. And then in 5 years, if God wants to send me somebody, then that's awesome. But for at least 5 years, I'm on a I'm on a man ban.
I don't blame you. This is the only man that I have. I was, you know, I think I was 5 years, maybe, yeah, 5.5 years when I got married. I'm recently divorced. And, you know, I thought that I was ready and had it all together, and I didn't. So, yeah, it is, definitely good to take your time. Um, and how about like your spirituality today? How are you kind of like working with that?
Well, that has actually grown a lot, especially in the last few months. I actually got a spiritual mentor. I so that she could help me with my spiritual prayer walk. And now I get up in the morning, I do my prayer and meditation in the morning. I do little prayers throughout the day. I do what's called a 1, 2, 3. My sponsor taught me. It's where you admit that you're powerless over whatever the situation is, and that you take a deep breath, you give it over to God, and you talk about it in a meeting or you talk about it with your sponsor, um, and you let it go. You let go and you let God. And I have a lot of those moments, and I am part of a prayer team at my church, um, and I just try to stay involved as much as I can, and my prayer walk I'm getting a lot closer to God than I was. I'm doing a lot more meditation, and you know, I'd like to get better at it, but it's one step at a time.
Yeah, and that's amazing, you know, being on a prayer team, like praying for other people. That's, you know, special people are called to be intercessors. So that is an amazing ministry. And uh so staying involved like in the middle, I called it in the middle of the boat, like that was really what kept me, you know, I stayed in sober living for 3.5 years.
Oh,
People
nice.
thought that I was like, you know, crazy, but the rent was good. I had my own, little apartment, and it was just I was thriving. I started my own business when I was in sober living. Saved up a bunch of money, like, you know what I mean? I was just really taking care of myself,
Right.
like growing in my spiritual walk, and I was pouring into this girl that I didn't even know existed, right? That I didn't think was worth pouring into, right?
Right.
So, um, let's see, we've got a question. I never understood that step one. I got sober without 12 steps. 12 steps made me worse. Step one seems like the worst belief ever to use for recovering. I think so. Say recovering addicts. So, do you want to explain your step one? Like, explain, like, how you use step one.
Well, step one is admitting that you're powerless over not just addiction, just your life, just everything that's going on around you, and that your life is unmanageable. It's coming to that place of surrender. It's like, you know what, God, I can't do this by myself anymore. I need help. Um, I'm powerless. I need to give, well, going more into step two with that, but just admitting that you're powerless and that your life is completely unmanageable. Because without step one, you can't do step two, step three, step four, and step five. And you can't have, I believe that you can't have, without the steps, recovery. You can stay dry for a period of time, but you don't really recover without the steps.
Mm-hmm. Um, so let's see. He says it was the powerless part, how to take responsibility, and with it came power. Right. The like the serenity prayer, I feel like,
Yeah.
knowing, having what courage to change the things that I can, and
Yeah.
wisdom to know the difference, because not all things are for us to put our hands on, right?
Right.
I think that's a big problem. I know for me, being a like control freak, right? I think Dominic, you can attest to that. I'm pretty control freak. And so like just being able to have like wisdom and discernment to say like, okay, I'm not gonna touch this. I'm gonna let God work this out, and knowing the difference.
Right. But there are 5 things that I can share with you that I do on a daily basis that help me in my recovery. And those 5 things are prayer, meditation in the morning, with my conversation with God, going to meetings and sharing at meetings, um, going to meetings, sharing at meetings, talking to my sponsor on a daily basis, talking to people in recovery on a daily basis, and self-care. Self-care is very, very important, you
Oh,
know.
yes, it is. Tell me about your self-care. What do you do for self-care?
What I do for self-care is like, I don't see, being a substitute teacher, I have the option of either accepting or not accepting when they call and they ask me to go into to teach. It's not like one of those things where um, it's not one of those things where I'm a teacher and that, and I'm calling out. So if I feel like I have substituted way too, like 3 days in a row, that's a lot for me. And especially somebody who has not really worked a job in a lot of years. So what I do is I make sure I take time off for myself. If I'm feeling tired, I I sleep as much as I can when I can, and I it's mostly for me. It's a lot of rest. It's like, do the things that I'm supposed to do. Write a list of the things that are important to me that need to get done, and how soon they need to get done in. But make sure that I'm resting in between, because especially with mental illness and having to take medication,
Mm-hmm.
I need to make sure that I have my meds. I need to make sure that I have my doctor's appointment set up. I need to make sure that I get plenty of rest and I don't overdo it, because that affects me and my person, not my personality, but my mood. Like, I'm around children all day, and I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
snapping at children because I didn't sleep well last night, or I haven't been taking care of myself in a way that I should, because all of that's important. It's not just recovery; it's your relationship with God, it's your recovery, but it's your self-care. It has to all work together, or it doesn't work at all. If you're
Mm-hmm.
lacking in one spot, you're lacking in the whole thing.
Yes, I tell people all the time it's balance, balance,
Yes.
balance, balance. Yes. Um, so let's see. Kevin says, my problem is alcohol. I did a 6 month residential rehab. I still mess up now and then. What would you say to Kevin?
What did I say to Kevin? Well, does he consider himself an addict? Because he says he messes up from.
Alcoholic, yeah. I think he's a alcoholic.
Oh, he's an alcoholic. Well, he's going to continue to mess up if he doesn't get a program or find some sort of support. It's not something that we can do alone. And my fear is, especially for me, it's a progression. It gets worse over time. It's not something that gets better. It gets worse over time. So it's like, you feel like, okay, it's not that bad because it only happens ever so often, but ever so often kind of turns into all the time eventually. And then, you know, it's best to get help now and start getting into the program now and getting into the steps and getting into what is inside that's causing you to do these things. It's causing you to want to drink
Mm,
and mess up your life. You got to get to the core of it, because if you keep saying it's not that bad, it's not that bad, well, my fear is that when it does get that bad, you might be in a position where you can't ask for help.
hmm.
you
Yes, that's good. I feel like a lot of mine was like guilt and shame that I kept trying to cover up. Rejection issues were like huge
know?
for me. Just like numbing things. What do you think, Dom?
Um, yeah, just like numbing things and just anything that doesn't feel good, say, really.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. Noodle Baker says it's because 12 steps were forced on me as parole condition after serving 6 years. I had been clean already in prison and was involved in the church there. Yeah, none of us like to be made to do
You need to do
anything for
anything. No,
sure. Yes.
it's definitely one of those things that it's definitely one of those things that you have to want. It's not one of those things where it's like you need it, but you have to want it. Because if you don't want it, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. Can't force recovery.
Nope.
You are right. I think a lot of times it takes what it takes. I feel like we can always expect recovery, but definitely can't force. Do you have anything you want to add on that?
Hmm?
Um, got Boston 2% in here. 2%ers stand up. Boston is the author of a book, Fire and Ice, the Meth Bible. And you can get it on Amazon. Boston and I do a lot of talks on the spiritual side of meth, which is why
Mm.
I asked you about that. Like, did you notice anything?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's interesting that in the meth world I feel like there is a very common theme, people seeing the same things, saying the same things, gang stalking, like weird
Shadow people.
figures, and then like having conversations. It's almost like, you like see a different realm
Yes.
that people who are not on meth don't see.
Right.
So yeah, very strange, very supernatural things that have happened. We've had so many guests and heard so many testimonies. We were kind of like, there's something to this. I remember when we all started collaborating and finding each other, like, wait, this happened to me too. This happened to me too. They just kept putting me in the mental hospital.
Yeah,
Like this.
exactly.
Like, wait a second, there might be something, something going on in the spiritual realm that, is unexplainable to people,
Yeah.
um, unless people are gifted with being able to see that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so Yes, so you as well, Tina, are not alone. And even though you might have gone into the mental institution for it, you may have seen some actual things that were not just delusions, you know? So um we always like to validate people in that, you know?
Yeah.
Let's see. We had Mike. I was afraid to smoke or inject something like meth, so I did was doing speed pills. They make you feel like a god and can make you a deviant. Yes. Yep, I'm sure speed pills. Yes, for sure. Boston 2% said those are demons. The things that you were seeing. Yes, that's what we stand on for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Um well, awesome. If nobody else, yeah, Boston said I've been there. Yeah. We've both frequented many mental institutions. So it happens when you're, you know, in that world. Do you have any questions?
Mm,
No?
no, I can think of now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tina, for coming on and for sharing your story. We're so proud of you for the path that
Thank
you're
you.
taking. And, you know, just continue doing that. Like for me, I always said that service was like my love language. Like
Yeah.
so serving in the community. So, you know, staying in the middle and working with those children, you know, that seems to bring a lot of joy to your heart and stuff. So, continue to do the things that make you happy and that are good for you, and you know, and someday God will bring both of us a man.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much. We're gonna get off here, you guys. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe
Thank
to
you.
Jamie Tall on YouTube, and we will see you next time. Fingers
Bye,
keep going and
guys.
stay away from the men.
Okay.
Pray for us. Pray for us.
Yes, please.